One of the common mistakes that I see a lot of guitarists making is getting stuck inside of one scale when soloing over an entire chord progression. Now you can usually tell because this often sounds like mindless noodling because there's no real attention to the chords as they're passing by. And this is especially noticeable when we've got a few chord changes which sit outside of the key. Now I've 100% been there myself, so I know the struggle. And this key center approach can be really hit and miss. So in today's lesson, I'm going to give you some simple strategies for breaking out of the so-called scale jail and soloing with much more intention over changes. The track we're going to be playing over is Stevie Wonder's Isn't She Lovely, which is a bit of an evergreen standard that's got some great chords in it. Specifically, I'm going to be using Biréli Lagrène and Silvain Luc's amazing version as our harmonic backdrop, and then wrapping this up inside a pretty standard blues shuffle feel. Let's have a look at the basic chord progression on the A section. We're in the key of G major, but we're starting off with E minor, which is our 6th chord. Then we've got an A7, which is the 2 dominant, D9 sus, which is our 5 chord, going to G major. Now you might have heard we've got some slightly more sophisticated versions of each of those chords. E minor 9, followed by A13, D9 sus, which is the same. You can think of that as a C over D. Go into G6-9. Then we've got this little turnaround chord, B7 sharp 5, which is acting as the 5 chord of the E minor chord that follows. Now the only real point of difference is that B7 sharp 5, which offers us some outside possibilities, but we'll get to that one a little bit later on in the video. Let's start off nice and simply with the key center approach. We'll think of the entire thing in G major and use the G major pentatonic scale. So it is possible to sound effective and avoid noodling by creating melodies and interesting rhythmic phrasing. And you can use your ears to guide the ship to a certain extent. Now one subtle idea which is really effective is to use the minor third as a grace note. That would be our B flat. This should be immediately recognisable from our E blues scale. But because we're in the key of G, this will be G major blues, and we're much more likely to then gravitate towards the root note G. So we're not really stepping too far away from the key, but you might already be hearing some chord changes which are passing by underneath, and this can be a little bit limiting. Now, what you might like to do is focus on the A7 or A13, because this sits outside the key of G major. It's what's known as a secondary dominant. That A7 is effectively the 5 going to our D9 sus. Now the major third is a particularly strong note when it comes to spelling out chord changes. And this is a real point of difference from our key center approach, because the third inside of our A7 is C sharp, which sits outside the key of G major. So what you can try and do is target that C sharp when we hit that A7 or A13 in bar 2. Noticed that I was repurposing one of the first ideas. But up a tone over A. Now you could think of this as coming from A major pentatonic, or A mixed Lydian. But really, we're just spelling out the sound of the underlying A dominant chord shape. Up until now, I haven't mentioned the major scale, and that's because the pentatonic does a pretty good job of avoiding potentially clashy notes, namely the 4th and 7th, that's C and F sharp. The C, for example, can sound pretty bad over the top of our E minor 9 chord and over A13. But we are missing out on some nice colour notes if we avoid them completely. For example, over our E minor chord, the F sharp is the 9th. And it's the 13th inside our A13 chord. And the C sounds pretty good over our D9 sus chord. As always, if you're enjoying the video, maybe think about subscribing to the channel. You can also find tab and backing tracks over on my support channel, and there I'll also be breaking down the chord progression in a little bit more detail. Links are down below. Let's leave the A section for now and move on to the B section. Here we've got a C major 7, which is our 4 chord, moving to a B7 sharp 5. That's the 3 dominant 7th, or the 5 of the 6 being the E minor 9 that follows it. And then we just cycle through the rest of the chord progression. Now we really want to accentuate this change to the B7 sharp 5 chord. And to do that, we'll be using the E harmonic minor, or to use its correct term, B Phrygian dominant. So check it out, we're going to use G major pentatonic over everything apart from that B7 sharp 5, where we're going to slot in our B Phrygian dominant scale. I'm just going to loop over the first 4 bars of the B section. works quite nicely as a descending idea. There I was starting on the C and running down to the 5th of the E minor chord. But you can come up with whatever combinations you like as long as we're landing on a chord tone from that E minor chord. Another simple trick I like to use over that B7 sharp 5 chord is a diminished 7th arpeggio built from the major third. That will sound like this. This will give us a B7 flat 9 sound. And because it's a diminished 7 shape, we can repurpose similar ideas in minor third intervals. We could even shoehorn the same idea over the B7 sharp 5 during the turnaround in the A section. Now, unless we've got a specific chord such as B7 sharp 11, or maybe B7 sharp 5 sharp 9, which is implying more of a B altered sound, the bass might be playing more of a generic dominant 7 sound, which is what we've got on the backing. Now this presents a bit of a dilemma because inside of that B altered scale we've got this clashy sharp 4 flat 5 note. Now what you often find is a bit of a compromise between our B altered scale and the B Phrygian dominant that we were using before. We can actually bring in the flattened third as a passing note. That will be the D here. So we get this kind of sound. This avoids that clashy note, and we might even bypass the 5th entirely. Both of those examples were actually scaffolding around a really simple B augmented triad. And you can see that coming directly out of our B7 sharp 5 chord. I'd like to finish with a super cool idea that pays homage to the Biréli Lagrène Silvain Luc version that I was talking about before. Now in their version, instead of playing an A13, they often play an A7 sharp 11 chord, which is implying a kind of A Lydian dominant sound. Now, instead of learning yet another scale specifically for this chord, you can access the sound really simply by playing a B major triad. You can hear it's got a really cool outside sound, and this is just from a simple arpeggio. I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson. There's quite a lot going on, so don't feel like you have to nail absolutely every single chord change. But if there's one thing that I'd urge you to focus on, that would be the harmonic minor move as we hit the B7 sharp 5 during the B section. As always, have fun, and I'll see you next time.